Over the last few months, we have been asked numerous questions. The most compelling to date is, are we federally recognized? And the answer is unequivocally yes. We are a federally recognized tribe. We're not on the list of serviced tribes, but we are a federally recognized tribe. Why do we say that we're federally recognized? Let's start all the way back at the very beginning, 1785, with the United States. At that time, we are in the Articles of Confederation, and the commissioners of the Congress of the Senate come to Keowee, come to South Carolina, and gather up all of those who spoke the Cherokee trade language, all of those who understood the Cherokee trade language. The commissioners in the State Department records say that there were 5,000 people present. Well, that's 5,000 men. They didn't count women and children at that time. So at that time, 5,000 are in attendance. And what do the commissioners say? That it's all of the tribes south of the Ohio River, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, and they are present. Well, we know from some of the other records, the signers, we know from those in attendance, those who later wrote about being in attendance, that there were Choctaw present, there were Chickasaw present, there were Creek present, there were Natchez present, there were Catawba present, Powhatan present, the Delaware and the Shawnee were present, and dozens of little small tribes, all present. What did they all have in common? According to the commissioners, they were Cherokee. Well, that meant that they understood or either spoke or understood the Cherokee trade language. The Chickamauga at that time were identified as the Lower Town Cherokee, or the lower towns. The reason that we know that is because in 1792, George Washington, in his fourth annual address to Congress, addresses the Chickamauga. I think it is November the 8th, 1792. We are addressed as the Chickamauga. Washington and Jefferson both never could say Chickamauga. It was always Chickamauga. Going back to our traditional name, Tiskamogi, the Tiska of the Mobilian era. And so that's the way that the English would pronounce our name is Chickamauga, Chickamogi, and Chickamauga is the southern way, apparently, of saying Chickamauga. But Jefferson and Washington address us as Chickamauga. Well, we move forward in the timeline. We sign another treaty, 1791, 1792. And all of a sudden, instead of being a percentage of the signatories on the treaties, we become the sole signatory on most of the treaties. The Lower Town Chiefs, the Lower Town Headsmen, the Lower Town Warriors become the sole signatories on a vast majority of the treaties between 1791 and 1816. Then all of a sudden, 1817 appears. The Lower Town Cherokee, almost half at that time, had already gone to Arkansas. They were living on the St. Francis River, on the White River, on the Black River, on the Arkansas River, on the Illinois River, the Buffalo. And so all of a sudden, we have all of these Arkansas chiefs um, that are already in Arkansas called Lower Town or Chickamauga. And the 1817 treaty is, by all ways of looking at it, is the United States acknowledging that the Chickamauga are not part of the Cherokee Nation, and the Cherokee Nation is not part of the Chickamauga. We spoke the same trade language, but we were never, ever ethnically, culturally, historically part of the Cherokee Nation. Um, the proof for that is that they were never in the Southeast Woodlands prior to, according to Chief John Ross's letters from Chief Charles Hicks, that they were not in the Southeast Woodlands till 1815. I think you can make an argument before that. When they were kicked out of the Iroquois Confederacy in the 1680s, um, they started moving toward the southeast. They come down the Appalachians, they get into Virginia sometime in the late 1660s, 1670s. They're in Virginia sometime around 1692, 1694. Um, but they're misidentified there as well. Um, because we were already doing trade. We were already doing treaties with Virginia at that time. And so we were speaking the same language, and so they were identified as Cherokee. You come into the Southeast Woodlands, they don't get into the Southeast Woodlands till the 1700s. If Charles Hicks is right, 1715, um, down in the Holston Valley. So they're the new kids on the block. We had been there way earlier. We signed treaties with the British colony of South Carolina in 1684. And so we know beyond a shadow of a doubt the Lower Town Cherokee, the Chickamauga, had been in the Southeast way longer than the Cherokee. We were speaking that language in the Southeast because we're identified in treaty as Southeast Southern Cherokee speakers, Irate. And so we know historically we are not them and they are not us. You get to the 1785 treaty, we're identified as Chickamauga in the treaty. Numerous of the chiefs sign it as their name and Chickamauga. Then, when you look at the names that are Lower Town, you can identify numerous. You get to the 1817 treaty. Um, the commissioners identify those they're speaking the trade language or understanding the trade language. They definitely split the two, one living east and one living west of the Mississippi River. The Cherokee at that, right before that, let's see, 1804, 1805, began developing their own laws based on the U.S. Constitution. And what they decide to do is that if you do not live within the territory of the Cherokee Nation, that you could not be a citizen and that you had no rights as a Cherokee. Well, that's okay with us because we were never part of them. The interesting thing about their laws, um, they really kind of bow down and kiss the butt of the United States. They pretty much copied the Cherokee Constitution, almost a direct copy of the U.S. Constitution. So you get all this bowing down, kissing the ring. We're not part of that. We never were. Um, and their laws make it very clear we could not be part of them, and we didn't want to be part of them. How does that make us federally recognized? Well, we're signing treaties individually away from the other group. Um, that group eventually capitulates to the whimsies and the wills of the United States, and like they had done for the previous 100 years, they just were not capable of being their own people. They had to be subservient to the United States. We weren't. We retained our sovereignty. We were under the jurisdiction of the United States. That is true. We signed treaties saying that we were under the jurisdiction, but we never gave up our sovereignty. Even in the John Marshall trilogy, where he said the Cherokee were not independent sovereigns, they were dependent sovereigns. We never agreed to that. We never said, okay, how do you do? We refused. Then you get to 1839, 1836, 1839. You get the Smithsonian creation in Congress, and they create a law to have books made. Congress requires books to be made, put into the Congressional Library. Well, one was printed. It was from Drake. In the front of his book, um, he does the official copyright stating that um, as an act of Congress, this book is taken to a federal courthouse and deposited into the Library of Congress. In his book, he identifies the Chickamauga, 90 miles south of the Cherokees, who had become their own people under Dragging Canoe. That identifies us. It says we are recognized by the Congress of the United States because they asked for that book to be published. In that book, Drake identifies the Chickamauga being on the Tennessee River, 90 miles south of the Cherokee. By that time, the Cherokee actually had already left Choate. They were already down into the Georgia, uh, north central part of Georgia. The Indian Removal Act had already been passed, 1830. We were already in Arkansas. We didn't care about the Indian Removal Act. Then in 1819, Congress passes a law aimed toward us. Doesn't specifically say the Chickamauga, it just says the Indians living on the Western Front. At that time, the Western Front would have gone all the way to the border of Arkansas. Well, who were we at that time other than the tribes on the Western Front? And that was a promise of the United States to provide agricultural assistance and teaching to all of the tribes there to keep them from becoming extinct and to prevent the extinction of those tribes. Well, not only did they do that, they promised to provide education. And the DeWitt Mission was a recipient. The DeWitt Mission is a mission that we sent our children to. And they were not just trained in the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. They learned agriculture because of the law that was passed. They learned English. They retained their traditional language. Unlike many of the boarding schools that came later, the DeWitt Mission for us, we helped control how it was operated. We helped control how it was done so that our children were rightly trained. John Jolly was very vital in that. Talentowski, before his death, vital in the way that that school would operate. It was already, his death had already happened, but he really was instrumental in the way that that school was going to be run. The Dwight Mission is another federal recognition of the Chickamauga. It was being paid to teach us. Come a few more years down the road, 1828, another treaty is signed. Only Chickamauga chiefs. Well, there's a problem with that even. Um, there were no chiefs of the Chickamauga who signed that treaty. There were no Lowertown chiefs who signed that treaty. And there were men on that treaty that signed it that would later become chiefs, or some of the most famous Native Americans of all time. But they were not chiefs at the time. They were actually commissioners given authority by the National Council of the Lowertown Chiefs, the Chickamauga, at that time called the Western Cherokee or the Old Settler Cherokee. They were only given permission to seek an outlet to the West that was promised in the 1817 treaty. And so they go to Washington, D.C. to ask for the Western outlet. Then the issue happens. They are kept at gunpoint in Washington, D.C. for 3.5 to 4 months. They were, according to the State Department records and the War Department records, even the Arkansas territorial papers say that they were kept in Washington, D.C. against their will, threats against their family, and plied with alcohol daily until they were so inebriated they had to have assistance going back to their rooms. Then the United States writes a treaty and tells them that they have to sign it or they'll never get to go back to their families. They'll never get to go back to Arkansas. If they signed that treaty, they all knew in 1824, just a couple of years before, that the council had voted that if you were to trade land, to sell land, or give land to the United States, you would immediately be executed. These guys knew they were going to die if they signed that treaty. That's why they had to be so drunk they didn't remember it. Then you have another issue on that treaty. A gentleman named George Guess signs it. Most Americans will know George as Sequoyah. He signs this treaty, and Ma signs this treaty, MAW. Well, there's an issue. The syllabary used to write George Guess's name, Sequoyah, has 4 syllables. Sequoyah is 3 syllables. Also, the signature uh, doesn't say anything close to Sequoyah. Then the signature right below is written in the same hand. It's written by the same person. So now we have a treaty that is forged. We now have a treaty that was signed under duress without permission of the National Council of Chiefs. And they called it a treaty. We called it theft. I wonder how the Supreme Court would think about that if it were challenged under, who, let's say McGirt. Well, half of our people go ahead and go into Oklahoma. Half of our people stay in Arkansas. You see this large group from the 17 85 all the way to 1850s, 1860s. As they are coming in, the Chickamauga, the lower towns, they're coming into northern Arkansas, north of the Arkansas River. They're coming in south of the Arkansas River. They're going all the way down to the Red River. So you have this large contingency of Chickamauga who have moved into southwest Arkansas from Mena over to Hot Springs down to Lost Prairie, right outside of Texarkana, all the way down to the Red River. Um, Today, if you look at the census records, you still see all of those families are still in that same general area. 30 to 40,000 people are in that same area. Now you have in that 1838, the Eastern Cherokee decide it's time for them to get over into Indian Territory before the U.S. military um, puts them all in stockades and forces and marches them like they did the Choctaw and the Chickasaw. So after the 1835 New Echota Treaty, which was signed exclusively by Chickamauga chiefs, by Lower Town chiefs, um, John Ross decides, let's wait till after harvest in 1838. Let's wait until it starts getting cold. And then we will take the money given to us. John Ross was given $5 million to move the Cherokee Nation without the U.S. military. It was according to John Ross, he moved them voluntarily. He hired the Light Horse Militia. He hired his own gun thugs uh, to move people along. John Ross didn't walk. He didn't go on the trail. He got on a steamboat and rode. John Ross never walked an inch of the Trail of Tears. He rode a steamboat all the way. Then, when he got to where he couldn't ride the steamboat anymore, he took a coach. He didn't walk it. How does this show that we are federally recognized? Because we're the only signers of those treaties. Then John Ross gets pissed off in 1839. Sometime around June 22nd, he decides the Lower Town chiefs aren't going to let him be God, let him run his entire show, steal our government, steal our land. So he decides to kill him, and he does. And the U.S. military supported him. U.S. military probably didn't have a whole lot of choice because he had 500 hired thugs with guns on their hips and rifles on their horses who would have killed any of the military who decided to go against him. General Arbuckle sure did bend over and kiss John Ross's butt. Well, they decided to start killing off all the Chickamauga leaders, and anyone who spoke out against John Ross was killed. Any of the Lower Town leadership that signed the treaty, the New Echota Treaty, their families were hunted down and eventually all assassinated. That's John Ross and his Cherokee Nation. That's not the Chickamauga or the Lower Town. We didn't have trouble with murders until the Eastern Cherokee, the old Cherokee, came in and began killing us off. Then they declare that there is unity within the nation. Well, it didn't work that way, especially when some of the lower town chiefs from Talentosky, Oklahoma, Indian Territory, today is Gore, Oklahoma, signed letters to the Congress, to the president, stating that their government had been taken and that they were not going to surrender their government. Well, in 1839, General Arbuckle basically gave the entire thing to the Cherokee, stole it from the Chickamauga. In 1838, December 31st, President signs a land patent based on the 1817 and then the 1828, 1833, and 1835 treaties and sends it to Fort Gibson for the Chickamauga chiefs. That's what General Arbuckle gave to the Cherokee, our land patent. Then let's progress. 1802, the Cherokee Nation approaches the Congress of the United States and asks to be terminated. And under the Cherokee Agreement of 1802, the Cherokee Nation self-terminates. Their council votes to allot the land that wasn't theirs, which was Chickamauga land, and the U.S. government obliges. 1906, the Curtis Act is passed that allots our land. It's sad. Our land that we died for, that our leaders were assassinated for, just stolen from us. And the United States government equivocated, even though that they knew it wasn't the Cherokee's land because they gave us a land patent for that land. Then you have 1934, the Indian Reorganization Act forbids, absolutely, positively forbids the Cherokee Nation from being part of the Indian Reorganization Act. And almost every portion, every section of the act, because they were deemed to be civilized. The last section, Section 19 of the Indian Reorganization Act, is very clear. Any tribe under the jurisdiction of the United States is a federally recognized tribe. We were still under the jurisdiction of the United States from the 1785 treaty. So we are a federally recognized tribe by that act. We're a federally recognized tribe by the 1836 Drake book requested by Congress. We're a federally recognized tribe by the 1819 Act of Congress for the civilization of the Western Front tribes. Just keep moving forward for federal recognition. 1968 Indian Civil Rights Act. Definition of an Indian and an Indian tribe. An Indian is a member of a tribe who is under the jurisdiction of the United States and has the ability of self-governing. Well, we've had self-government since way before 1684 because we signed a treaty in 1684. We've been around for a while, way before these little colonies turned into the United States of America. Then Clarence Thomas, bless his heart, he signs or he writes the majority opinion in Carcieri versus the United States. I mean, Carcieri versus Salazar. He was the Secretary of Interior. It was about a tribe up in the Northeast who wanted to um, have land put in trust for it so he could have a casino. Um, Clarence Thomas said the tribe was not under federal jurisdiction at the signing of the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act, and therefore it is not a federally recognized tribe for the purposes of that act. But that all tribes who were under the jurisdiction in 1934 at the signing of the Indian Reorganization Act are federally recognized tribes. Huh. Even Clarence Thomas says that we're a federally recognized tribe. We come to the law, which is a retrospective law. It takes away our federal recognition in 1994. The Federally Recognized Tribes List Act doesn't include us on the list, but it does something very interesting. It says that the Secretary must keep a list, an accurate list of all federally recognized tribes. Well, the President didn't do it. I mean, the Secretary of Interior didn't keep an accurate list. And that's why the Tliglit tribe, in the second section of that act, um, tells that they were not federally recognized, but they were under the jurisdiction of the United States, just like the Chickamauga. And so the Congress, in that second part of the act, tells the Secretary of Interior to place them on the list because they are under the jurisdiction of the United States through treaty, just like the Chickamauga Nation. So while we are not on that list, the act itself says that we are supposed to be on the list. So, Secretary of Interior, you're in violation of your federally required obligations to us. Your fiduciary responsibility to our tribe is being violated. Congress of the United States, you passed the laws. The executive branch is failing to uphold those. You need to tell the executive branch what to do. But there's a problem with the legislative branch and the Chickamauga Nation. Congressmen and senators, you took an oath, you took an obligation, and you're not even willing to uphold it. It's almost as if a casino tribe in the state of Oklahoma has a great big bag of cash, and your manhood and womanhood is inside it. Because you sure are not exhibiting the qualities of a congressman or a senator. So are the Chickamauga a federally recognized tribe? Yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now it's time to end this dance. Put us on the list. It's time to end the dance. Put us on the list. And one last time, as every good teacher and orator will tell you, say it 3 times. It's time to end the dance and put us on the list.